You need to stop being so emotional. Honestly, it's exhausting. That's what Rachel said as she dropped her fork onto her plate and pushed away from the table. I sat there in silence. My hands were trembling under the table, but I forced a smile. It was my birthday. I had just shared how anxious I'd been lately. The racing thoughts, the chest tightness, how hard it was to sleep. I wasn't asking for anything, just trying to be real. But apparently, real made people uncomfortable. Rachel grabbed her purse, muttered something about too much drama, and walked out. My mother didn't even look up from her wine glass. No one said anything. I stared down at my untouched cake. Chocolate. My favorite. But the sweetness was gone. My throat tightened, but I refused to cry. I just sat there, too much, too sensitive, too emotional. Again, I wasn't always called too emotional. When I was little, they used sweeter words. Sensitive, soft, tender-hearted. My dad used to say, Abby feels everything 10 times deeper than the rest of us, and he'd ruffle my hair like it was a compliment. I didn't know back then that tenderness came with a time limit. My earliest memory of feeling too much was in the 2nd grade. A boy named Jared tripped during recess and scraped his knee. While other kids laughed or just ignored him, I ran straight to the teacher and begged her to help. I cried the whole time. She cleaned his wound. Later that week, Jared gave me a paper flower he made in art class. But at home, when I told my mom what happened, she sighed and said, "You're always crying for someone. You can't carry everyone's pain, Abby." I didn't understand what was wrong with that. In middle school, I cried when our cat ran away. I sat by the back door for hours, holding her collar in my lap, convinced she'd hear my heartbeat and come back. When she didn't, I didn't speak for 2 days. Mom was annoyed. She told my aunt at Sunday brunch, "Abby's been acting like someone died. It's a cat, not a person." That was the first time I remember feeling embarrassed for caring too much. I started noticing how my emotions made people uncomfortable. If I got teary at movies, my cousin Madison would elbow me and whisper, "You're such a baby." If I got anxious before a family trip, my brother Dylan would roll his eyes and say, "Here we go again, Abby's having a meltdown." They were just teasing, but their words stuck like little splinters under my skin. High school made it worse. When my best friend, Jenna, told me her parents were divorcing, I hugged her and cried with her hard. Too hard, apparently. Because the next day, she avoided me at lunch. When I finally asked why, she snapped, "It's not about you, Abby. I don't need you falling apart every time I go through something." I had thought I was showing love. Turns out, it looked like attention-seeking to her. From then on, I learned to bite my lip when I wanted to cry, to clench my fists when someone else was hurting, to wait until I was alone in the bathroom to let the tears fall. College was a brief breath of fresh air. I majored in psychology. Finally, people cared about feelings, or at least studied them. I made friends who didn't shame me for asking deep questions or journaling every night. But the moment I graduated and stepped back into my family's world, it all returned. The quiet judgment, the subtle eye rolls. There was one Thanksgiving where I made a toast. Nothing fancy, just a thank you to everyone for being there, and a quick mention of how hard the year had been. Mom whispered to Rachel, "She's doing that thing again." Rachel laughed into her wine. I went to the bathroom and cried. Quietly. I even ran the faucet so no one would hear. Dating wasn't any easier. One boyfriend, Corey, told me during a fight, "You process everything like a therapist. It's exhausting. Can't you just let things go?" Another, Lucas, dumped me via text. He said, "You're not crazy, Abby. But I always feel like I'm walking on eggshells with you. Like one wrong word, and you'll spiral." He meant it as a soft letdown. But I read it over and over that night, as if it were proof that my emotions were a curse. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being proud of my sensitivity. It became something I tried to manage, like a condition I had to keep hidden. I started overthinking every reaction. If someone spoke sharply to me, I told myself, "Don't take it personally." If I wanted to cry, I said, "Don't make it a thing." If I was moved by something, I looked around before letting my face show it. The truth? I began apologizing for myself before anyone else could.
It was easier that way.
People started praising me for being so calm and collected. But it wasn't real. I was just learning how to swallow my storms. By the time I turned 30, I had become the woman everyone came to for advice. I could listen without interrupting, validate without inserting myself, offer empathy without letting it show on my face. They thought I was strong, but I was just well-practiced at hiding what I felt. Then came the birthday dinner. The one with Rachel. The chocolate cake. The silence. The moment that reminded me, no matter how much I shrank myself, it still wasn't enough. They would always find a way to call me too much. And suddenly something inside me shifted. It had been 3 days since the birthday dinner, and not a single person had called. No text. No apology. No, sorry, that was harsh. I checked my phone too many times, each time pretending I wasn't hoping for Rachel's name to light up the screen. Eventually, I convinced myself it didn't matter. I buried myself in work, rearranged the spice rack, rewatched old episodes of The West Wing. But you can't outrun silence. It always catches up. By Friday, I couldn't take it anymore. I called my mom. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just wondering if everything's okay?" She hesitated. "Yeah, things are fine." "Why?" There was a long pause. My heart beat like a warning drum in my ears. Just after what Rachel said, I thought maybe someone would check in. I offered. Mom sighed. "Abby, look, you know how Rachel is."
She didn't mean it like that.
"You took it too personally, as usual." There it was. The dagger wrapped in reason. "I shared something with you guys. I was vulnerable." "And she left," I said softly. "She was overwhelmed, honey." "You put a lot on people sometimes," she replied. "Maybe next time just try not to make things so heavy." I bit the inside of my cheek. So this was my fault now. Again. I didn't realize my feelings were a burden. I whispered. "Oh, Abby," she said, that same condescending tone I'd known all my life. "You know I love your heart. But not everyone's like you. You've got to toughen up a little. It's just too much for people." There it was again. That phrase. Too much. Always too much. I hung up soon after, polite and poised. Then sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the floor for an hour, trying to decide if I was allowed to feel hurt, or if that, too, would be too emotional. A few days later, I got the final proof I didn't ask for. A photo popped up on my cousin Kelsey's Instagram story. Rachel, Mom, Dylan, and a few others from the family, all gathered around a fire pit. Wine glasses in hand. Laughing. Together. The caption read, "Fall family nights are the best." I wasn't invited. Not even told. Just erased. I clicked through the rest of her story, each frame feeling like a slap. In one clip, Rachel joked on camera, "Don't cry, Abby." "Just kidding. She's not here." Laughter. Even Mom cracked a smile in the background. My heart dropped into my stomach. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just turned off my phone and stared at the wall, that numb kind of heartbreak that doesn't even know where to begin. The next morning, I received a single message. It was from Kelsey. "Hey, sorry you couldn't make it last night. We figured you needed some space after dinner. Hope you're doing okay." The audacity. As if they hadn't deliberately excluded me. As if they hadn't laughed while doing it. But that was the pattern, wasn't it? They hurt me, then acted like I was the fragile one for reacting. They rejected me, then pretended they were protecting me. And, the worst part? I had let them. I had accepted the gaslighting, the blame, the crumbs of inclusion. Because I kept hoping that maybe one day they'd see me, understand me, appreciate what I brought to the table, not as a therapist or a sponge for their emotions, but as a person. A woman. A sister. A daughter. A human being who just happened to feel more. But hope started to die that day. And in its place, something else began to grow. Not anger. Not even revenge. Something quieter. Something steadier. Resolve. That weekend, I went to a small bookshop on 7th Street, the kind with creaky floorboards and handwritten staff recommendations tucked between pages. I wandered aimlessly for a while until one title stopped me cold. The Highly Sensitive Person by Elaine Aron. I picked it up and opened to a random page. You are not weak. You are simply wired to notice the emotional undercurrents others miss. That is not a flaw, it is your gift. My eyes welled instantly. Not from pain this time. From recognition. For once, someone had named what I'd been carrying all my life. And they didn't call it too much. They called it a gift. I bought the book, a notebook, and a lavender candle, like I was building a survival kit for my soul. Then I went home and deleted Rachel's number. Muted Kelsey. Archived every group chat that made me feel like a guest in my own family. I didn't make a scene. Didn't post a cryptic quote or tell anyone off. I just disappeared. For the first time, I realized I didn't have to beg to be included in places that weaponized my softness. I didn't have to apologize for seeing the world in color when they only wanted grayscale. And just like that, the version of me who tolerated it all, she began to fade. The first thing I felt wasn't peace. It was emptiness. Silence, even when chosen, can be deafening at first. But I committed to it. No more texting them first, no more birthday reminders, no more sitting at the emotional door, hoping they'd knock. I didn't announce anything. No long messages. No boundaries posts. I just let go. Quietly. One by one, I stopped showing up. Rachel's baby shower invite came a few weeks later. A group text from my mom. Let's all come together for this special day. Abby, I know you'll want to be there. I left it on read. Not to be petty. Not to punish. But because something inside me had finally unclenched, and I didn't want to tighten up again just to make them comfortable. The peace I found in that silence wasn't loud or dramatic. It was soft. Like a weighted blanket I never knew I needed. My mornings changed. I stopped checking their stories, scrolling through Rachel's curated life, looking for clues to my own rejection. Instead, I started going on walks. No destination. Just me, my sneakers, and the sound of leaves cracking underfoot. I'd walk past houses where families laughed together on porches, and instead of feeling envy, I let the ache exist without shame. It was okay to want connection. But I finally understood I didn't have to settle for connection that hurt. I also stopped rescuing people emotionally. No more late-night pep talks for people who never asked how I was. No more advice paragraphs to cousins who ghosted me until they were spiraling. I gave myself permission to say, that sounds hard, and leave it there. It felt radical. Liberating. I was raised to believe that kindness meant availability, that to be good was to always pick up, always soothe, always fix. But now, I realized that true empathy doesn't mean self-abandonment. And that realization changed everything. At work, people started commenting on my energy. You seem calmer lately, said Jenna, a coworker who used to lean on me constantly during her breakups. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it, said Mark, my manager, after I started leading meetings with more clarity and less over-explaining. They didn't know what had shifted. But I did. I had stopped pouring myself into people who poked holes in the cup. I started saving my energy. And in doing so, I found myself more present, more grounded, even more compassionate. But now, it wasn't desperate compassion. It was chosen. I chose who received my emotional bandwidth. And for the first time in my life, I chose me. One afternoon, while clearing out my closet, I found a shoebox tucked behind some sweaters. Inside were old cards, letters, and photos, most of them from the people who now treated me like a liability. Rachel's birthday card from 2016 said, "You're the glue that holds us all together." A letter from Mom, written after I helped care for her post-surgery, read, "You have a heart of gold. I don't know what I'd do without you." I stared at the handwriting, my fingers tracing each word. I had once been appreciated.
Seen.
But only when I made their lives easier. Not when I asked for anything back. That box felt like a museum exhibit for a person I no longer was. I placed it in the trash bin. Not out of spite, but because I didn't want proof that love had ever felt like a transaction. The holidays came and went. I spent Thanksgiving with a small group of friends from my book club, women who knew how to listen, who cried during readings, who never told me to tone it down.
We laughed.
We cooked together. I brought homemade cranberry sauce that no one mocked me for over-seasoning. It was simple, but it was real. Christmas Eve, my phone buzzed once.
Mom.
We're all here tonight. We miss you. Call if you want to stop by. No, sorry. No, we hurt you. Just we miss you. As if the pain I'd endured was imaginary. I put the phone down and lit a candle. Made some tea. Watched Little Women in my pajamas and cried when Beth died. And for the first time, I cried without shame. I didn't wonder if I was too much. I didn't censor the emotion. I let it come, and then go, like a wave. By spring, I had enrolled in an evening certification course in trauma-informed coaching. I'd spent so much of my life absorbing other people's pain. Now I wanted to do it on purpose, with tools, with intention, with boundaries. During one of the classes, our instructor, Angela, said something I'll never forget. Empathy without self-protection is martyrdom. Empathy with boundaries? That's leadership. Something clicked. I wasn't broken for feeling deeply. I was simply never taught how to protect my softness from those who exploited it. Now I was learning, and that made me powerful. Eventually, my world grew wider. New connections. People who admired my ability to hold space, to sit with complexity, to validate without controlling. I started mentoring a few younger women at work who said things like, "You're the first person who made me feel safe here." I spoke at a small mental wellness workshop about emotional awareness in leadership. Someone came up after and said, "You made me rethink how I treat my daughter." I never realized I was teaching her to hide her feelings. And just like that, my lifelong weakness had become a tool for healing. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need a dramatic reunion or a tearful apology. My power wasn't in proving them wrong. It was in knowing, quietly, fully, that they never got to define me in the first place. Sometimes, recognition doesn't come from where you expect. It comes from a stranger who sees your truth before the people in your life ever do. I was wiping down tables at the back of the art gallery when I noticed a woman staring too long at one of the pieces, one of mine. My manager had reluctantly agreed to display 3 of my paintings during a New Local Voices event, probably just to keep me quiet. I didn't even care if they were hung in the worst spot. I just wanted someone to see them. The woman wore a long emerald coat and had silver hair that curled softly around her collarbone. She held her glasses in one hand while leaning in to study the brushstrokes, like she wasn't just looking, she was listening. She turned toward me, and when our eyes met, I felt an almost eerie familiarity, like she was silently reaching into something I had hidden. "You painted this?" she asked, her voice warm but direct. I nodded, nervous. "Yes, ma'am." She tilted her head. "What's her name?" "Amelia," I said. "Amelia Hart." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stared at me the way an art teacher might examine a student with hidden talent. "Do you know who I am?" she asked. I blinked. "No, sorry." She smiled. "I'm Evelyn Ross. I run the Montclair Artists Retreat and the New Horizons Showcase in Portland." The words didn't register at first. It was like hearing a completely foreign language. She saw my blank look and laughed gently. "It's okay. You wouldn't know unless you follow the indie art circuits. But your work, this piece here," she pointed to a blue and gold abstraction I'd titled Resurface. It stopped me. "There's a kind of emotional intelligence here you can't fake. It's rare." My heart beat hard in my ears. "Thank you. That means a lot." Then she asked something no one had ever asked me. "Where did you study?" I hesitated. I didn't go to art school. I dropped out of college. I work here part-time." Her eyes softened. "Well, your instincts are better than some MFA graduates I've seen." I didn't even know how to respond. I was still stuck on the fact that someone important was talking to me like I mattered. Like my work mattered. She handed me her card. "I want you to submit your portfolio to the next New Horizons showcase. Deadlines, next month. I'll personally make sure your application gets reviewed." I felt like the world tilted slightly on its axis. I don't even know what to say. "Just say yes," she said. "Say yes to your talent. Everyone else catches up eventually." She turned and left as quietly as she'd appeared. And just like that, the axis of my life began to shift. Not from validation from family, not from friends who ghosted me, but from someone who saw me with clear eyes. That night, I stayed up until 3 a.m. updating my website, scanning every piece of artwork I'd stored under my bed, and writing my first real artist statement. Every stroke of the keyboard felt like reclaiming something, like building a spine where others tried to melt me down. I didn't tell anyone about the encounter with Evelyn, not even Lisa. I didn't want to jinx it. I wanted this, my thing, to grow in sacred silence, untouched by sarcasm or pitying glances. When I submitted my portfolio to the showcase, I whispered a prayer I hadn't said since childhood. Not asking for fame or fortune, just a chance. Weeks passed. I kept showing up to work, kept painting on my off days. The rhythm of discipline anchored me, even without applause. And then the email came. Subject line: "Congratulations, you've been selected." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at the screen, stunned and calm at the same time.
Like my soul already knew this was supposed to happen.
2 months later, my work hung in a professional gallery in Portland, with my name printed on a glossy brochure beside a mini bio that didn't mention my past or my family's opinions. It just said what mattered. Amelia Hart, painter, storyteller, survivor of silence. Strangers walked past my work. Some paused. A few took photos. One woman even cried while standing in front of Resurface. No one asked me about my GPA, or why I didn't go back to college, or if I ever mended things with my mom. And for the first time, I didn't care. Because I was here, where my soul belonged. The first person who ever truly recognized me wasn't family, wasn't a friend. It was someone with no bias, no backstory, just a sharp eye and a compassionate heart. Sometimes, strangers tell you who you are long before your loved ones ever bother to look. And that truth, that twist in the road, it saved me. The moment that turned the tide didn't come with fireworks. It came with a knock. Just a quiet knock. I was home alone, sitting on the couch with my laptop, scrolling through a spreadsheet titled Possible Law Firms. I had already spoken to a paralegal the day before, but I wasn't ready to file anything until I had a full understanding of the consequences. The knock made me jump. My heart skipped in that paranoid way it does when trauma has made you suspicious of even the wind. I opened the door, and there stood Paul, his mother. "Hey, Jessica," she said, avoiding eye contact. She'd never once visited my apartment, not even after all those dinners I had hosted for her. This woman had watched me fold napkins next to her son and laugh like family, and now she was standing on my doormat as if she had something to say. I stood in silence. I didn't invite her in. She finally looked up. "I didn't know, okay? I had no idea Paul did any of that until you sent the documents to Dad."
Dad.
Not Paul's dad, her father, Mr. Aldridge. He was a retired judge. That's why I had sent him the report of the forged signature and the timeline I'd compiled. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see," she said, "but I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." Her voice cracked. "I defended him when I shouldn't have. I told people you were overreacting. But my father, he said this could ruin Paul's career permanently." That was the moment. The moment I knew they all knew now. Not just Paul. Not just his new girlfriend. But his entire family. The reputation-obsessed Aldridges. I didn't reply. Not to be rude, but because I didn't trust myself to speak without crying or screaming. She left quietly. Later that evening, I got a phone call from a blocked number. I normally don't answer those, but I picked it up this time. A man's voice came through. "Jessica Peterson?" "Yes. This is Detective Harvey with the White Collar Crimes Unit at LAPD. We've received your case file through your attorney, Ms. Bloom. I'm calling to let you know we're opening a formal investigation." I stood in the middle of my kitchen, my hand trembling. "Ma'am," he continued, "I just need to confirm. You're stating that Paul Aldridge submitted this loan document bearing your name and signature without your knowledge or consent?" "Yes," I said. "He forged it." There was a pause. "Then, we'll be contacting him for questioning within the next 48 hours.
It was real now.
2 days later, my phone exploded. Not with Paul's calls, but with messages from people we knew. People from work. From our shared social circle. Even from old college classmates. Apparently, the news had gotten out fast. Paul's cousin worked at a PR firm and had tried to get ahead of the story, but that backfired.
Why?
Because someone leaked the evidence. I hadn't posted anything public. I'd sent the files to a lawyer, who sent it to a judge, who then passed it to law enforcement. I only shared pieces of it with a close friend. But someone with access to Paul's side of the family, leaked the PDF with all the highlighted areas, signatures, dates, and inconsistencies. And it went viral. The post was uploaded to Reddit's r/fraud subreddit with the caption, "My ex-fiancé forged my name on a $50,000 loan and tried to gaslight me when I found out. Guess who's being investigated now?" Within 6 hours, it hit the front page. The next day, BuzzFeed picked it up. Then Insider. Then Daily Mail, with the classic dramatic headline, "Jilted Bride Turns Tables on Ex-Fiancé After Signature Forgery Goes Viral." They blurred my name, but the screenshots had enough detail that people figured it out quickly. My LinkedIn got flooded with messages of support. Even some recruiters reached out. That week, Paul called me 9 times. He texted me saying, "You're ruining my life. Please take it down. We can talk." But I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I let truth do all the talking. His new girlfriend, Megan? She made a public Instagram story, whining about cancel culture and false accusations, but then quickly deleted her entire profile when commenters found out she was named in the document too, as the second applicant on the loan. So not only did Paul forge my name, he used the money to co-sign a future with someone else. The fallout spread further than I imagined. People who had sided with him began retracting their words. One of his college mentors wrote a public post on LinkedIn stating how deeply disappointed he was to see Paul involved in fraud. But the one that hit hardest? The law firm that had offered Paul a summer internship revoked the offer. Their email, which somehow also got leaked, was brutally professional. "Due to recent developments and the legal nature of the allegations, we will be rescinding your internship offer effective immediately. Our firm maintains a strict code of ethics that extends beyond technical guilt."
Boom.
The tables didn't just turn, they flipped. For the first time in months, I felt the air shift. Not with revenge, but with validation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't emotional or overreacting. I was right. People started messaging me asking if I'd go on podcasts, interviews, even TikTok lives to share my story. I didn't say yes to all of them, but I did agree to one, a women's legal empowerment podcast called Not Just a Girl. That episode, titled "He Signed My Name, So I Signed His Future Away," became their highest downloaded episode that season. The host ended the show by saying, "Jessica, you didn't just get justice. You educated thousands of women about financial abuse and forgery." I hung up the Zoom call, sat on my couch, and finally cried. Not from pain. From release. This was the moment they all noticed. The moment I stopped being the quiet girl Paul cheated on, and became the woman he should have never underestimated. I never made a big announcement. I didn't post a single thing online. No passive-aggressive quotes. No cryptic statuses. I just started moving differently. Quieter, sharper. The moment Brent was escorted out of the courtroom, pale, sweating, cuffed, I didn't feel joy. I felt clean, like the fog had finally lifted, and I could see what was mine again. I didn't need revenge. That had already happened the moment truth stood up, louder than lies. But now I was focused on rebuilding. In the months that followed, I returned to my design work, only this time for me. I opened my own LLC, filed every paper properly, and built a small, loyal client base. People who trusted me, who paid me fairly, who weren't siphoning off my efforts behind my back. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment that was small, but mine. The walls weren't fancy, but I painted them with my own hands. I picked every piece of furniture with intention. Nothing Brent had touched came with me. I donated it all. I wasn't bitter. I just wanted space that didn't echo with lies. Brent tried to contact me twice from prison. Handwritten letters. The first was all apologies. How prison changed him. How he saw things differently now. How he hoped I'd remember the good times. The second was a little darker. He asked why I had to ruin his life like that, and how he only did what he thought was best for both of us. I burned both letters in a ceramic dish on my tiny balcony. I never responded. The court gave me restitution, monthly payments that he'd be required to send once he was out, assuming he got a job. I didn't count on them. I built a life that didn't rely on anything Brent-related, emotionally or financially. What I didn't expect was to go viral. See, during the court proceedings, a journalist had followed the story. Not for the drama, but because it highlighted a growing issue of financial abuse inside relationships. She reached out after the trial. I hesitated at first. I didn't want to be a sob story. But the way she framed it, you're not a victim. You're a warning and a blueprint for what healing can look like. So I agreed to do the interview. It aired on a small, independent, women-led podcast. I thought it would get maybe a few hundred views. Within a week, it had hit over 2 million. I still remember sitting at my tiny kitchen table, coffee in hand, watching the view counter tick up. Emails flooded in. Women, older, younger, professionals, stay-at-home moms, writing to say, "You told my story." Or, "I didn't know it was abuse until you said that." Or, "I finally left after watching you." I cried. Not because I was famous, but because I had finally transmuted my pain into something useful. It shifted something in me. I realized maybe this wasn't just about surviving what happened to me. Maybe I could build something from it. So I started writing. Not just blog posts, but a book. I called it Signed Without Consent. It was part memoir, part toolkit. A guide for identifying financial manipulation, for rebuilding autonomy, for reclaiming your identity after being emotionally robbed. A publisher picked it up after I self-published the first 3 chapters online. 6 months later, it hit Amazon's top 10 in its category. Brent's name was changed in every chapter. I didn't need to drag him. I just told the truth. And the truth was enough. The biggest moment of shift, though, that happened at a women's empowerment conference in Seattle. I was invited to speak, nervous out of my mind, heart hammering in my chest. I stepped on stage, looked out at a crowd of 800 women, and I told them the story, but not from a place of anger, from a place of knowing. I thought I was crazy, I said, for questioning the money missing from our account, for wondering why my credit score dropped, for doubting my own eyes when my signature showed up where I knew I hadn't written it. But I wasn't crazy. I was being controlled. The room was silent. And then standing ovation. After the event, a young woman approached me, maybe 22. She said, "My boyfriend just took out a credit card in my name. I thought it was no big deal. But after hearing you, I'm walking away." I gave her my card and said, "Call me if you need help leaving." I never wanted power. But in that moment, I realized I had it, not over Brent, but over the part of myself that used to shrink. That version of me? She didn't exist anymore. One afternoon, a mutual acquaintance messaged me. "You won't believe who applied for a job at my cousin's company, Brent. They Googled him and found your podcast episode. He didn't get the job." I didn't reply, just smiled. Poetic, I thought. Quiet power isn't about revenge. It's about knowing your story is no longer theirs to twist. Brent still had years on his sentence. I had decades ahead of me, free. Free to love again, not someone else, but myself. Free to build, without fear of sabotage. Free to speak, without needing permission. Free to be just Jessica. And that was more than enough. I never planned revenge. Not in the movies, not in a dramatic fashion. I didn't dream of confronting Brian in a courtroom or exposing him at a party.
No.
My version of revenge was quieter, simpler, but far more powerful. Months had passed since the last time I'd seen Brian. The police had done their job, and after the video of his outburst went viral, his name became synonymous with disgrace. Brian Sanders wasn't just a man anymore, he was a warning label. His company let him go shortly after the scandal erupted. No formal reason was cited, but we all knew. Corporate America doesn't love messy headlines. As for me, life shifted in ways I never saw coming. The very first unexpected change came through a phone call. "Hello, is this Jessica Collins?" a woman asked on the line. "Yes," I said, curious. "This is Rachel Levin from the Today Show. We saw your story, the video, the police report, and your recent blog post about emotional manipulation. Would you be open to an interview?" I thought it was a prank.
Me?
On national TV?
But no.
It was real. I flew to New York, sat under the blinding studio lights, told my story, not just about the forgery, but about the gaslighting, the way women like me are silenced, doubted, erased by charming manipulators. The audience cried. The hosts hugged me. And when the segment aired, my inbox flooded, messages from women all over the country. Some had been through worse. Others were just beginning to suspect their own Bryans. And a few just wanted to say, "Thank you." That was when I realized what had started as a nightmare was now a platform. I launched a podcast, Silent No More. I didn't try to be fancy. I recorded episodes from my bedroom closet to avoid echo. But each week, I shared stories, mine and those of others. Real women, real betrayals, real healing. It exploded. A local university asked me to speak at their women's leadership panel. A literary agent emailed asking if I'd consider turning my story into a book. One day, I opened a message from Netflix. A producer wanted to option the rights for a limited docudrama. I laughed out loud when I read it, not because it was funny, but because life was finally speaking my name in a language I understood. I never expected to see Bryan again. I assumed he'd retreated into a shadow. But the universe has a peculiar sense of humor. It happened at a bookstore. I was signing copies of my self-published book, Unwritten Lies, How I Reclaimed My Voice After It Was Stolen, at a cozy independent bookstore in downtown Austin. The line was steady, people were kind, warm. And then, as I was autographing a copy for an elderly woman, I saw him. Bryan, standing in the back, half hidden behind a display of leather journals. Thinner, slightly unshaven. No longer the self-assured man who once forged my name on papers and smirked as he got away with it. For a moment, time slowed. My pen hovered mid-signature. But I didn't panic. I didn't tremble. Instead, I finished signing the book, smiled at the woman, and asked the next person in line to step forward. Bryan never approached, just watched. He stood there for 15 minutes. Then turned and walked away. That night, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line, "I owe you an apology." I clicked. It was from Bryan. "Jessica, I saw you today. I wasn't sure you'd recognize me. You probably did. I don't deserve a moment of your time, but I wanted to say what I never said before. I'm sorry. I ruined everything. Not just legally or emotionally, but morally. I've lost friends, jobs, credibility. I still can't sleep some nights. But I see what you've done with your pain. You turned it into something incredible. Maybe one day, I'll be half as strong." Bryan. I read it once. Then again. And then I deleted it. Not out of spite. Not because I was still angry. But because I didn't need his words anymore. His apology couldn't change the past, and I no longer needed it to validate my healing. My story didn't end with his redemption. It ended with mine. A few weeks later, I got another opportunity, one that truly made the circle complete. A nonprofit organization, Voices United, invited me to become a board member. They work with survivors of emotional abuse, helping them rebuild not just their lives, but their confidence. I said yes. And as I sat in my first board meeting, looking around at other women who had clawed their way back from darkness, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was leading. No one handed me power. No one gave me permission. I had taken it back, quietly but completely. And in doing so, I had become the kind of woman younger me would have admired, the kind of woman Bryan never believed I could be. My life today doesn't resemble the one I left behind. I live in a small lakeside home in Vermont now. There's a wraparound porch with a swing that creaks when the breeze picks up. Wildflowers have taken over one side of the garden, no matter how much I try to contain them, and honestly, I've stopped trying. I let nature be free, the way I wished I had been earlier. Most days I write. Sometimes I speak at women's retreats or community workshops. I never mention the name of my ex-husband, his fiancée, or his mother. Not even once. I tell my story through metaphors, letting the pain transmute into something softer. Something useful. I've built a quiet legacy. Not one made of fame or public victories, but of peace. Of women who message me privately saying, "Thank you for telling your story. I thought I was the only one." That's the part one never expected. That something so personal, so devastating, could become the key that unlocked doors for other women trapped in silence. There's a coffee shop I go to every Thursday, owned by a single mother named Amelia. The first time I walked in, I just wanted caffeine. But over time, we built a gentle bond. She told me about her own heartbreak, how her ex-husband tried to bankrupt her and take her son. She thought she was broken. One afternoon, as she handed me my usual drink, she whispered, "I read your piece in Soul Voice. I knew it was you, even though you didn't use your name." And then she hugged me.
Just like that.
No words. In that moment, I realized something. I hadn't just rewritten my story, I had passed the pen to others. My ex-husband, Matthew? I don't know where he is now. I stopped looking. His name doesn't appear in my searches, and I've blocked every number and email linked to his name. Some mutual friends say he moved to Arizona. Others say he went bankrupt after a real estate flop. I don't care to confirm either way, because the real closure wasn't knowing what happened to him. The closure was knowing what didn't happen to me. I didn't become bitter. I didn't spend the rest of my life obsessing over revenge. I didn't try to destroy anyone else's happiness just because mine had been tampered with. Instead, I invested in the one thing they could never fake or forge, myself. Sometimes I look back and wonder, was the betrayal the worst thing that happened to me, or the best? Because without it, I'd still be trying to fit into a life that was never shaped for me. I would have kept shrinking, smiling, tolerating, wearing pearls I didn't like, laughing at jokes that made me uncomfortable. Now my laughter is real. My silence is chosen, not forced. And love, it came later, not in the way people expect, not a new husband or a dramatic proposal, but in friendships that felt like home. In the soft weight of a dog curled at my feet while I sip tea at sunrise. In the mirror, where I finally see someone I recognize. It turns out healing isn't loud. It's not a clapback. It's not a post. It's not a courtroom win. It's walking into your own life and realizing you stayed. Through the fire, through the loss, through the shame, you stayed. You rebuilt. And now you own your story. The old me was a character in someone else's narrative. The new me? I'm the author. And every chapter from here on out begins with one quiet, powerful sentence. I choose myself.